Hey, it's that time again. Time for another episode of Shelve It or Shove It, the completely superficial way to pick books for your TBR based solely on their covers. I am your host, Daisy X Machina, the drag queen detective who investigates all things speculative in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. If I don't like a book, I'll shove it. If I like a book, I'll shelve it. And of the shelved books, I'll pick one book for my TBR. And we're looking at Goodreads new releases for March to pick one book for the April TBR. And again, this is just looking at their covers. And I'll be looking at science fiction, fantasy, and horror, starting with science fiction. And first up is The Dream Hotel by Leila Lalami, Pulitzer Prize finalist. Now, I am kind of intrigued by seeing what science fiction novel was a Pulitzer Prize finalist. Very curious about that, but I don't like this cover. There's this, I guess, purple, blue background, and there's this rectangle of orange that seems to be going inwards, sort of this 3D effect into darkness, and one little solitary figure and their shadow in front of it. I don't know what this could be about. I have no idea what this novel could be about. And as much as I'm curious about what science fiction novel was a Pulitzer Prize finalist, this cover isn't doing it for me. So I'm going to have to shove it. Next up is John Scalzi's When the Moon Hits Your Eye. Like a big pizza pie. No, just When the Moon Hits Your Eye. And Scalzi is, of course, a humorous science fiction author. And it does look like the moon is a big piece of Swiss cheese. And it looks like there's an astronaut taking a selfie. I like this cover, and I like the title. And I like John Scalzi. And the last book I read was Starter Villain, which I enjoyed, about the cats. And I am curious about this one too. So I'm going to go ahead and shelve it. Next up is Dissolution by Nicholas Binge. I guess it's sort of this geometric cut up of a sky. Kind of reminds me of Inception, that sort of special effects type rolling of geometric shapes. I don't know what this could be about. No idea. I'm going to shove it. Next up is Olivia Wright, Murder by Memory. Olivia, wait. Murder by Memory. If you look at this font, the A's kind of look like R's. Anyway, a mind is a terrible thing to erase. And there is this person floating on a chair with a cup of coffee, and there's books floating around them. I like this cover quite a lot. Waite's writing is gorgeous and always purposeful by book page. I don't care about the blurb, but I do love this cover. I like it quite a bit, so of course I'm going to shelve it. Next up is The Third Rule of Time Travel by Philip or Cassie. And there's this, it's a very plain white cover, but there's a sort of cutout of a butterfly, so butterfly effect from Ray Bradbury's story. And a recommendation by Laird Barron. I don't know who that is. And I'm kind of wonder what is the third rule of time travel, but the title isn't enough to make me pick this one up, so I'm going to have to shove it. Now we're moving on to fantasy, and first up is A Harvest of Hearts by Andrea Eames. And I guess it's a silhouette of a heart, an actual biologically accurate heart, but there is stars or a spacescape behind it, and there's a little cat underneath. I love cats, as you know. There's a crown and this sort of arabesque orangey red and gold design around it. I'm confused. This cover confuses me. I have no idea what it's about. There's elements I like, but they just seem very disparate. I think I'm going to have to shove it. Next up is The River Has Roots by Amal El-Motar. And apologies if I'm messing the name pronunciation. Anyway, there are flowers and this squiggly road line. There's roots and flowers, and it's fantasy. Not enough for me to pick it up. I'm going to have to shove it. Next up is The Hymn to Dionysus by Natasha Pulley, author of The Mars House. Okay, it's a Greek retelling, probably, and there are leaves, looks like grape leaves around it, and a Greek building that's on fire. I'm not really interested in another Greek retelling, even though Dionysus is kind of an interesting god of Greek mythology. For this one, I'm going to have to shove it. Next up is The Rag Picker King by Cassandra Clare, who wrote the Mortal Instruments. A very good writer, young adult writer, but this is in the adult section. Is this their first adult novel? I'm not sure. But the cover is, there's sort of this fancy border around it. There is I guess a modern city above and a sort of Greek city underneath. And there's a raven, and I'm going to guess portal fantasy, maybe. You go from one world to another. Rag Picker King. I don't know. I'm not really being drawn to this one. I'm going to go ahead and shove it. And finally, in fantasy, The Bane Witch by Ava Morgan. I like this little blurb. Very little poison can do a world of good. And there are mushrooms and leaves and a little house. And I'm kind of bored by it. I don't think I'm going to pick this one based on the cover, so I'm going to shove it. Now we're moving on to horror. And first up is Honeysuckle and Bone by Trisha Tobias. There is sort of this gothic house, I guess. And it looks like there's a little creepy figure in the doorway. And is there a graveyard underneath? I can't really tell. But it's surrounded by this lush jungle setting with flowers and bees. And actually, it's an attractive cover. I think this is an attractive cover, but there's nothing unique to really make me hook into it. So I'm going to shove it. Next up is Old Soul by Susan Barker, author of The Incarnation. So I'm guessing some type of reincarnation themed horror novel. And there's this woman's face that's kind of out of focus. Not really interested in this cover. So I'm going to shove it. Next up is At Dark, I Become Loathsome by Eric LaRocca. And there's a recommendation by someone, I don't know. Anyway, we have a very ugly looking cover, but that could work for horror. It looks like sort of the statue with these demon hands sort of digging into it or ripping it apart. I think that's what I'm seeing. Yeah, it's very disturbing. But for me, it's not enough to pick this up by the cover, so I'm going to shove it. Next Next up is Clever Little Thing by Helena Eichlin. And there's this woman's silhouette with these broad paint strokes in orangey yellow. Boring. I'm going to have to shove it. And finally, in horror, in our last book, is Mask of the Dear Woman by Lori L. Dowd. And I'm assuming it's American Indian or Indigenous American. There are antlers in this woman. I guess it's the deer woman sort of standing in a field. I wonder why this is horror. I don't know. I just am not attracted to this cover either. I think I'm going to have to shove it. Okay, this is going to be quick because I've only shelved 2 books this month. John Scalzi's When the Moon Hits Your Eye and Olivia Waite's Murder by Memory. And John Scalzi's cover is cute. It's really cute with the moon that's cheese and the little astronaut taking a picture of himself. But Murder by Memory is just really cool. I just like this guy floating in space. So I'm going to think it's going to be some type of psychic machine that you can plug into and get your memory erased, maybe. Some type of dream state, sci-fi, maybe. You know, I'm going to pick Murder by Memory by Olivia Waite. Let's go ahead and read the blurb and see what I've gotten myself into. Okay, right away, I'm not very enthused that this is the first in a series. It says Dorothy Gentleman #1, but it also says a memory called Empire meets Miss Marple in this cozy spaceborne mystery helmed by a no-nonsense, formidable auntie of a detective. Now, if this is sort of a cozy mystery set in space like Muir Lafferty's Midsolar Murders, which I really did enjoy, I'm going to be happy because each of those are a standalone and just featuring a detective that solves a mystery in each novel. So hoping that's what it is, but let's go ahead and read. Welcome to the HMS Fairweather, Her Majesty's most luxurious interstellar passenger liner. Room and board are included, new bodies are graciously provided upon request, and should you desire a rest between lifetimes, your mind shall be most carefully preserved in glass in the library, shielded from every danger. Near the topmost deck of an interstellar generation ship, Dorothy Gentleman wakes up in a body that isn't hers, just as someone else is found murdered. As one of the ship's detectives, Dorothy usually delights in unraveling the schemes on board the Fairweather. But when she finds that someone is not only killing bodies but purposefully deleting minds from the library, she realizes something even more sinister is afoot. Dorothy suspects her misfortune is partly the fault of her feckless nephew Ruthie, who, despite his brilliance as a programmer, leaves chaos in his cheerful wake. Or perhaps the sultry yarn store proprietor and ex-girlfriend of the body Dorothy is currently inhabiting knows more than she's letting on. Whatever it is, Dorothy intends to solve this case because someone has done the impossible and found a way to make murder on the Fairweather a very permanent state indeed. A mastermind may be at work, and if so, they'll have had 300 years to perfect their schemes. Okay, I am excited about Murder by Memory by Olivia Waite. It does sound like a cozy mystery in space, and this could be a series of this cozy detective named Dorothy Gentleman who solves a murder or mystery in each volume, which again is very much like Muir Lafferty's Midsolar Murders. So I'm very happy about that, assuming this is going to be its own sort of standalone story. Okay, so I want to know what book or books you would have picked based solely on their covers. Let me know down in the comments. And while you're there, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.